Hello, it is Lex from the newly rebranded Overlanding Lex. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you're keeping well. In my last video, I had promised to make a separate video elaborating on my 5 overlanding tests. So here we go. Let's dig in. What are those tests? So test 1, climbing test, which I'll elaborate on in a bit. Test 2, roof rack test. Test 3, sleeping in test. Test 4, mechanical test. And of course, the final test is the comfortability test. So let's dig in. Let's get into it. Okay, the climbing test. You're thinking, what do you mean, Lex? Honestly, personally, I feel if you are going to be doing a lot of camping and overlanding, and if you have things on your roof rack or on your vehicle, you will appreciate my struggle here, which really isn't a struggle, it's just my preference. And that is the space between the top of the tire and the bottom of the wheel arch or wheel flare. Like, there has to be enough space there for me to shove my foot into, well, the first foot initially, and then grab onto the roof rails and yank myself up. Why do I say that? Because, like, I appreciate, like, for example, in this picture, this was us wild camping in Scotland. The ladder for the roof tent is actually on the other side of the Defender, but I needed to access the roof tent and get something from there to use in the back of the Defender. I should not have to move the ladder from one side to the other in order to access the roof tent. So I want to be able to just climb on the wheel and do whatever I need to do, either in the roof tent or maybe access my jerrycans or whatever I have in the roof tent. My next vehicle has to be climbable. I have to climb it. I must climb it. It's absolutely important. And I think those who know this will appreciate it. So the first test I'm putting all of these vehicles I've been tested through is the climbing test. Can I climb it? Like, is it climbable? Can my boots fit into there? Yes or no? And you'll find out, I guess. So that's test number 1. Test number 2, of course, if you are going to be climbing the vehicle, then certainly there has to be something for you to reach, right? There has to be a reason for you to climb it. And my reason is the roof rack. If I'm going to be overlanding, which I will be doing a lot more of, I absolutely have to make use of that roof space. I have to use it, and whatever vehicle we're getting next has to have the ability for me to install a roof rack to it. It's an absolute must. And this is a good example. This picture was taken in Scotland. I think this one was taken in probably Dorset or Devon. They're two different places, but Dorset or Devon, that was taken in. And you can see there, I mean, I have cramped quite a lot on my roof, and it works. Well, it worked for me. Like, I had no issues with it, and everything up there is all properly secured. I've driven thousands of miles across smooth and rough terrains, no issues whatsoever. Everything there is safe, right? So the point here is, here we had a sort of 2 weeks expedition trip around Scotland, from London to Scotland and then back to London. And this picture is actually taken on the Isle of Arran, which is in the Outer Hebrides in Scotland. And honestly, on this island, they have very, very few filling stations. So if you're going here, you really have to plan your trip properly. And I'll be making a separate video of our Scotland trip. I've been lazy, I haven't done that yet. And I'll tell you more about what happened there and our tips and things like that. But to cut the long story short, we knew we had to prepare a way for basically refueling, because we knew the filling stations on the island had different opening times, and more than likely we wouldn't be able to buy fuel from there. So what I did was I got 40 liters jerry can, and I filled up with 40 liters diesel before we got the ferry to the island. And actually, I mean, I did fill up the tank and then filled up this as well. And we used it. We ended up using it because we just drove around, we explored, we saw places, we saw things. It's an incredibly beautiful island. And honestly, I would recommend it to anyone who is looking to travel to Scotland and around Scotland, overlanding or on an expedition. You should go there. Beautiful place. I mean, we had this spot to ourselves, and the sort of the water receded like quite far, and we were able to walk down and just sort of roam around all of this area, which is beautiful, incredibly beautiful. You find pictures of them on the YouTube, the Instagram account. Yeah. So anyway, for this trip, it was important that we had the roof rack to attach the roof tent, to install the 40 liters jerry can, and also my tools box as well. So should the Defender break down and it had to be recovered, I needed to have my tools box outside rather than having it hidden somewhere here or at the bottom of my passenger seat, because that just isn't helpful for anyone. So from my perspective, a roof rack is a must if you're overlanding and you need to use that roof space. So whatever the next vehicle will be, it has to have the capability for me to install a roof rack to it. I think that's a no-brainer. I think you agree on that. Good, let's move on. Test number 3, the sleeping in test. This is more like a response to trauma test. And what I mean by that is I've got 2 experiences here. This first one was this happened in Fort William, so Ben Nevis. We arrived at the campsite at the summit of Ben Nevis. So the first night camping was incredible, loved it, amazing. We got up early and we climbed Mount Ben Nevis, which is the highest mountain in the UK. And as we began to descend, this descent was about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. We just ran down. We were hungry. But as we're coming back down, the wind began to pick up, and we didn't think anything of it because we thought it was just probably normal wind. But we soon realized that actually it was more than normal wind. This is actually a windstorm that was coming up. And I'll just play this video for you to see what happened here. So. This will take a few seconds. It's my laptop just playing up. And then I can play, there we go, I can play the video for you. So here we go. Okay. 2 minutes. That tent, the family were away, they came back, it was broken. The guy tried to fix it, he couldn't fix it, just abandoned it, drove back, got into his Discovery and drove off with his family. This is all crazy. Look at it. And I think the guys who have left, you can hear how windy it is. Now look over there, where you've got the classic cars. They had a massive green tent on. So, you get the gist. It was windy. I mean, seriously windy. The video goes on for longer than that, but to cut it short, effectively, what happened there was, as the night drew closer, the winds picked up, and it was a massive windstorm. And the way it happened was we eventually went to park behind a row of edges, in the hope that by parking there, the edges would provide cover against the wind. But no, not really, because the winds sort of came in waves. You know, when you go to the beach and you sort of see the waves coming in, the winds came in waves, and you could hear it from afar, sort of building up and sort of coming towards you. And as it comes closer, it then hits, and when it hits the tent, you feel the Defender sort of swaying from left to right, and it's a very scary experience. And the worst part is, there are times when it builds up, and you wait for it, and then it doesn't come. You're like, oh, what's happening here? Like, hit us or not hit us? It was a traumatic experience, but it's something to laugh about now. Nothing happened to us. We probably should have gotten out and gotten in the defender because the winds were so strong. We didn't feel safe just leaving the defender and sort of stepping outside. But the roof tent handled it. I was surprised. It handled it really, really well. So that was our first experience in Fort William. And then when we got to the Outer Hebrides, on our second night wild camping, guess what? It happened again. We ended up this time, we said, look, it's happened the first time. We stayed in the roof tent. We were safe, but we don't want to put it through this experience. We don't want to put ourselves through the experience again. And also, in the Isle of Aris, whilst we were there, we couldn't find a sheltered area for us to put up the tent. So we were just surrounded by hills. So definitely, I think if we'd slept in the roof tent, we would have damaged it, and our lives would have been in danger. So we thought it makes sense to just make room in the defender and sleep inside the defender. And yeah, I mean, I think we had about 3, maximum 4 hours sleep. It's such a small space. Again, it's a 90, so that's to be expected. And we had to sleep sort of crossed legs and change positions. It was terrible. It was terrible. But anyway, that experience gave birth to the sleeping in test. So my view is, whatever car we're getting next has to have enough space. Should we decide that actually we don't want to sleep in the roof tent, or we don't want to put up the tent for whatever reason, that we want to sleep inside the vehicle, the next vehicle has to have enough space for both of us to sleep inside it with the chairs folded down comfortably. So there you go. That is sleeping in test. Now, test number 4. Okay, you don't need to talk about that. Test number 4. This is the mechanical test, and I'll play this for you, and then we can talk about it.
What are you doing?
Just doing my final prep checks, checking the water coolant level, checking the oil as well, making sure we're good enough to get us from this. Oh, there you go. So, that's quite low, but I mean, let me wipe that up actually and check again. But I'm gonna have to add some engine oil before we leave. And that's it, just to check that everything else seems fine. Yes, you can see. This is the minimum, this is the maximum, this is quite low. So I'm gonna have to top that up before we leave now. That's it, just make sure everything is fine with the engine before we set off. Well, clearly my acting skills needs working on. But let's put that aside. Effectively, what I'm saying here is, whatever the next vehicle will be, I have to be able to interact with it. I have to be able to look at it and be able to prepare it for a long trip, because we'll be traveling in some cases, say for 700, 800, 1,000 miles. And of course we'll take breaks in between, but we might have one straight journey for say 500 miles, and that might take maybe 6 hours or something like that. So we have to be able to make sure, I have to be able to make sure that before setting off on that journey, I can check the oil levels, the coolant levels, check everything, and be able to attend to things myself without having to be dependent on a recovery company or a mechanic to help me out. Again, earlier in the Isle of Aris, for example, if the car had broken down there, I would struggle to get it fixed. Our trip would pretty much be ruined because we would need to be recovered, and I wouldn't be able to. I mean, again, obviously, I paid a lot of attention to the vehicle. I look after it, so it looks after me. But my point here is, I have to be able to interact with the vehicle, pop up the engine, do some magic there, and then set off. In this instance, we were actually so this was our last day of campaign, of wild campaign. This was Loch Lomond in Scotland. And we're about to set off on I think it's about 550-mile journey from Loch Lomond to Sheffield. I think that's about the right distance. And for such a long distance, I had to make sure I had done my checks. As you could see there, the engine oil was quite low. and if I was going to drive it for that long, I certainly would have had issues, or it might have run out. So just being able to check and do some tests on the vehicle before a long distance journey is an absolute must for me, and I have to feel that with the next car, with the next vehicle, that I can do that, because you've got some vehicles where all of these things are covered up, and you're just like, what do I do? Like, how do I touch something? So I need something that's fairly accessible, fairly open, and I feel empowered to touch it. And honestly, I've got some great shots of me doing these things on the in the new series. So watch out for that. Now, the final test is the comfortability test, and this is born out of our experience of driving the Defender. And now I must say this: I love the Defender. I would most likely own another Defender again in the near future, just not whilst we're in London. But with the Defender, I'm 6'4", 0.5. As you can see here, when we're driving for 6 hours, sitting in that position just isn't feasible. And at times, Anna and I often share the driving. We generally do. But even then, just long distance driving in that position isn't good for the body. And I know there are things I can do to it. I could sort of cut off I could trim the bulkhead and do all sorts. I just want to overly modify the Defender. But our experience of long distance traveling from the Defender is that we need something more comfortable from the next car. And one other point to make is that, and again, these, like, I got the basic trim, so there are other seats in Defenders that are better than this. But for the basic model of the Defender, it comes with this vinyl seat. Now, when it's sunny, like it's seriously hot, you don't want to be driving in this when you're doing long distance, because your back will become wet. I mean, everything on this surface will become wet. And most times I'm often driving in summer with my top off, because it's just not feasible to sit in this and drive in the hot weather. And also, this doesn't have air condition. I know many do. So our experience of driving the Defender means whatever we're getting next has to be a lot more comfortable than what we had in the Defender, and also the suspensions as well. But then again, a Defender is built on purpose, and it does what it's meant to do, and it does it incredibly well. No competition there. So that is the end of the 5 tests. So should we do a quick recap? All right. Test 1. Do you know it? You sure? All right, let's do it. So test 1 is the climbing test. Test 2, the roof rack test. Test 3, the sleeping in test. Test 4, the mechanical test. And then test 5, the comfortability test. So what I've done now is I've put all of these, so I've test driven all of these 5 vehicles here, and I've put them through all of my 5 tests. So I started with the BMW X5. Comfortability, impressive. But I won't give away anything else. Did X5, did Audi Q7, I then did the Toyota Hilux Invisible X, and then after that I test drove the Land Rover 110, and then finally I test drove the Dacia Duster, which was really interesting. I was surprised by that. So if you want to know how all of these cars performed against my 5 tests, please do subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon, so once I upload any of these videos, you'll be notified. Now, I've done all of the recording, I'm still editing, so hopefully in the next couple of weeks you should have the videos coming up to you on YouTube. Now, having said that, I think it's worth being clear on what I'm not doing. So, I'm not doing a generic review of the vehicles. I'm not doing a trim level review. Why? Because honestly, there are hundreds of videos of these on YouTube already. Check out Matt Watson, Powwow. He does amazing videos on these things. He's impressive. Like, I love the guy. So like, I'm not doing any of those things because those videos are already on YouTube. I'm not doing a review of the suspensions or say the 4x4 capability, which I think is important. And maybe there might be other There might be a separate series I'll be doing on that, thinking about overlanding and suspension and difference between 4x4 and 4x2 and all-wheel drive. I'd love to get into that, but I'm not doing that in this video. I'm also not taking the vehicles off-road, and I'm not camping in them. I'm not doing that because I'm unable to do that. But what I'm doing is basically putting all of these 5 vehicles through my overlanding test, which have come about based on my experience of overlanding over the past year plus, and what I would like from the new vehicle. So if that sounds great to you, like I said, please subscribe, hit the bell icon, and yeah, I really look forward to sharing these videos with you, and I'm definitely very excited about it. Thank you for joining me again, and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.